I played a lot of games, and I mean a lot. Most DMs who have some years on them usually run games for a few tables at most. Usually it's just one. So my experience as a DM is a little unique because I've run games for I think at least 250 players at this point. And I gotta say it's staggering how many people I see online on forums that have tastes when it comes to RPG gameplay that doesn't fit the system that they're using to play. Like I genuinely believe that most people who play D&D don't want to play actual D&D. I mean, people say that 5e is a simple system, but I'm just like, where? Where's this simple system you're talking about? I have no words as someone who is getting into tabletop RPGs for how frustrating it was to wrap my head around the difference between character levels and spell levels and how they're actually different, and you don't just get third level spells at level 3. And if you look at other RPG systems, you definitely know that 5e is not simple. Unless you're comparing it to older editions like 3rd. Other RPGs like Tiny Dungeon, Low Fantasy Gaming, that's the name of an actual game, and Dungeon World all put the roleplay in roleplay gaming. I think even Blades in the Dark decides to just go with resolving combat with a single dice roll, if I remember it correctly. It's been a while since I played it. Now maybe you don't want your combat resolved in a single roll, but I see so many players say that the most enjoyable part of playing D&D is the role playing, which is crazy because when you look at the D&D rulebooks, you realize that not only is combat the biggest part of D&D, it also dwarfs any other aspect of the game. Most of the other systems that I mentioned before have standalone rulebooks with monsters included in that book. Like imagine the rules for the game and the monsters in the game in one book, and the books are still small. I think fantasy gaming is something like 278 pages short while also including monsters. But Dungeons and Dragons has an entire book dedicated to just monsters. And that thing is 352 pages long. Like imagine the book just for monsters is bigger than the rule book including monsters for other fantasy games in general. So if you've ever said, I'm looking for 70% roleplay, this game is not for you, bro. Almost everything about making your character goes over things that contribute to your combat capabilities and usefulness. And anything that isn't combat tends to be exploration. And that's because in broad strokes, there's 3 pillars of gameplay, which is probably listed somewhere in the Game Mastery Guide for D&D, but usually listed in most other RPGs as well. Combat, exploration, and role-playing. And out of those 3, combat takes a huge chunk of the book. Almost everything in the character creation, the spell section, the equipment section, etc., all give you tools for fighting monsters. Other parts of the rules, if we're including Xanathar's Guide to Everything, exploration. Tools proficiencies, traps, hazards, survival. By the way, as a side note, I'm not sure why a ranger class exists in a system that also has Goodberry and Create and Destroy Water as spells at a low level. But back to the rule set, there's a small sliver cut out for role-playing. I mean, if you really think about it, there aren't many mechanics in the game that actually support RPing. There are some features that come through maybe racial feats or some bard classes, things like that, charisma-based classes. But really, you just have persuasion, intimidation, which is rarely used, and deception. I mean, there is performance, but it's such a niche skill. There's only certain circumstances where you're really going to get a lot of mileage out of putting a proficiency in that skill. Like, changelings are pretty busted when it comes to role-playing in political-style games, and Glamour Bard, it can be really strong as well when it comes to social situations. But the RP support pales in comparison to what's there for other parts of the game. Which makes me wonder, if you're one of those people who want to play a role-playing game so much, why are you playing a war game like D&D? Like, you the type of human to go to a steakhouse and order seafood, or ask a vegan to make you a burger. You will actually play a game of American football and complain when you don't use your foot enough in the sport. And the only difference here is that American football has a misleading name. But D&D stands for Dungeons and Dragons. I know that probably came off as super condescending. It's not meant that way. I'm just saying you got options. Options for your preferred style of play. Heck, even a system like Pathfinder 2nd Edition has more rules based around role-playing than D&D. Try out Dungeon World if you want a more role-play, narrative-focused game, because it really does focus on that style of play in that system. I figured I should just make this video while my channel is just starting out, before I get a big community with a lot of people to get angry at my hot take. And yeah, this isn't my usual style of video. It's more of an opinion piece or a commentary on something that just crossed my mind. Let me know if you think I'm full of crap in the comments section. And as usual, leave a like if you like the video and subscribe, or I'll make an OnlyFans dedicated to mind flayers. Why'd I write that? Also hit the bell so my tiny channel doesn't get lost in the algorithm. I've been Locke Lamar, and I'll see you next time. Actually, really quick, I am still working on that podcast. I'm going to record the first session today, and I'm hoping that I'm going to have everything edited in post and the music, all that stuff, ready to go later this week. So moving forward, you can expect to find 2 episodes from the podcast every week. They're going to be short, bite-sized chunks of content, so you don't have to sit down for like 3 to 4 hours. It's going to be me and my friends. I'm going to be running my home game, and everyone's going to be able to see an example of how I run my games. Okay, this time bye. You're still here. Okay.